The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Hal Copple, Jr. They were born on December 5th, 1946. He served in the Army during Vietnam and Desert Storm. He achieved the rank of Colonel, and we are recording this on March 2nd, 2013. I am William Richter, and I'm conducting the interview. No relation. All right. Sure. Dr. Copple. So first let's just start about, where and when you were born.
I was born in Panama. My dad was a Navy pilot down there. I'm a post-war baby.
Okay.
He was assigned to the Canal Zone as an instructor pilot or something. So I was born outside the United States. But of course, I'm an American citizen. Then my dad, being a Navy pilot, we had great assignments growing up. I was privileged to live in Hawaii several times, Newport, Rhode Island, Washington State, went to high school in the Norfolk, Virginia area. So I really got to grow up all over the United States, and I got to live in Hawaii before the jets came. There was no tourism in Hawaii until the jets came in the late 50s, so we used to get a boat and climb go out to the Arizona and climb all over it. It was not a shrine then. A lot of things in Hawaii still showed a lot of battle damage. Used to dig up stuff, and had 2 tours there. Went to elementary school there in Rhode Island, back to Hawaii, and then to Norfolk, Virginia. I graduated from high school in actually Northern Virginia.
Okay.
And all those years, my dad went in the Navy in the 1930s as a pilot. In fact, the Japanese sank his carrier in World War II.
Wow.
And my dad only died a couple of years ago. So I grew up always assuming that I would be a Navy pilot like my dad. It never occurred to me that I would do anything else. Then in high school, when I was a senior, I was going to go to the University of Nebraska. I was a senior in Virginia, so when I applied for Navy ROTC to become a pilot, I had to take a physical and found out I was colorblind. And they said, you cannot be in the Navy as an officer and be colorblind. So a good friend of mine in high school, I didn't know what to do. I was just stunned by that. His dad, who I knew well, had just come back from being commander of all Special Forces operations in Vietnam. And he said, why do you want to be in the Navy anyway? Why don't you do something a little more worthwhile? He was a pretty hardcore guy. And eventually you can become Special Forces. And I said, Special Services sounds good. He said, no, they rent canoes. Special Forces, not Special Services. So I signed on to ROTC and went to Nebraska from 1965 to 1969 with an English degree and was in ROTC. Back in those days, they gave you $50 a month. That was quite a bit of money back then. And then when I was a junior, they offered me actually a scholarship. So I got $200 a month and plus tuition and books, but obligated me to at least 4 or 5 years of active duty Army. And of course I went to summer camp and things like that, and I really enjoyed ROTC. I put a lot into it. So I graduated in the summer of 1969, and the day I graduated, I was a 2nd Lieutenant Regular Army in the branch of infantry. So that day, I went to graduation at Nebraska, my car was packed, and I was on active duty and headed to Fort Benning, Georgia for infantry school. Then I went to jump school, which was 3 weeks where you become a parachutist. And right after that, for I think about 8 or 9 weeks of ranger school. And all that completed in just around Christmas time of 1969. And at that time I was married with about a 3-year-old son.
Okay.
So I was sent to Schweinfurt, Germany. And the Army in Germany was very drawn down and depleted because of the requirements and needs of Vietnam. So I spent my first, I think, 6 or 9 months as a platoon leader and company commander in an infantry division with armored personnel carriers and only a small number of soldiers in my unit, most of whom were draftees and they didn't want to be there. It was hard. Then I went to be Chief of Staff, I guess you could say, of a divisional 3rd Infantry Division Non-Commissioned Officers Academy. About that time, my first wife said, I'm going back to the States. So I thought, what do I want to do? So I said, I want to go to Vietnam. So I actually, put in my application to go to Vietnam in the infantry. But already that would have been about 1971, fall of 71, maybe early 72. And at that time, our American Army, in fact, all of our services in Vietnam, were struggling greatly with morale issues. And I thought, it's a sad thing to say, I don't want to be with American soldiers. I heard it was very hard to motivate them. They saw no reason to go out into and fight Chuck. They sometimes assassinated their officers. It's called fragging.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure that I could deal with that. I didn't know what to do. So I said I'd rather work with the Vietnamese as an advisor. So I went back to then Fort Bragg and took about a 3 or 4 month school on advisory, things to do as a military advisor, and also took some Vietnamese language. I actually speak a fair amount of Vietnamese, and I actually use it. I do.
Yeah.
So then I went over, I was transported and flew over to Vietnam on a charter airplane, landed in the dark there, and nowadays when you land, it's a chartered airplane. I still remember this. When you get on that airplane, you get off. They land in the dark, and they don't turn the lights on. They just get in and get out fast because of the mortar attacks and the 122 rockets coming into Tan Son Nhut. The stuff's going off all the time. So they get you off the plane fast. They don't turn the lights on, no landing lights, no lights in the plane. And as we all walked off, wearing our fatigues and our little tiny bag, I do remember the stewardesses, I forget what airlines it was. It might have been American, I don't remember. Wished all of us Godspeed and a safe return. And I always thought, that was really nice of them. They'd touch our arm and say, hope you come back safe. So then I had about a week or so in a military area in the Saigon area where I got my uniform, my weapons, I sewed my stuff on, some briefings, and there was only about 4 or 5 of us there. And one of my good friends was another infantry captain. I was an infantry captain by then. And so he and I were friends back in the States, and we were friends in our Vietnamese school and friends over there. We flew over together. He was married. It was his second tour.
And what was his name?
John.
John.
His name was John. And he had a wife and 2 kids. So after about 5 days, we go out to the airfield, and he's going to go north. They just simply said, you go north. Couple, you go south.
Okay.
So they took us out, 4 or 5 of us young captains, and deposited us on a runway there, and planes came up. And I said, tell you what, John, let's meet back here at the Officers Club here in a month or 2. We'll just keep in touch, right? So last, what happened to him? He vanished. Within a couple of days, I heard that he'd gone missing, and I've since found out what happened to him, that he was a good friend. And he was on a small twin-engine turboprop plane that flew out over the Chinese Sea, flew up north and was going to fly into Wei. And the last report there was the pilot, there was 3 other people on the plane, said, we got an engine fire, and they said, we'll come find you. They never did. So
wow.
He was dead with a widow and 2 children before his wife was even sure he was in country. And I have the aircraft accident report on that, and I think about him sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, my first tour, they sent me down south. Vietnam is a long, narrow country along the South China Sea. Very long country like that. It's divided by our military into 4 areas called corps. And there was I Corps, which is up along the DMZ, and that's where the Marines often were, and infantry, but the Marines were way north. In fact, the DMZ, between North and South Vietnam, is the demarcation in I Corps. Just below that is 2 Corps, and 2 Corps is very mountainous, and the DMZ, I Corps is also. And then 3 Corps was mostly down towards north and south of Saigon, and mostly west towards Cambodia, and that's where places like Tay Ninh and the Cambodian invasion were. It was a tough place. They're all tough. Yeah. But I was assigned for my first 6 months to a somewhat pacified province called Kinh Phong, and I was a mobile advisory team leader. And by the time I got there, this would have been, I think, fall of '71. The Americans were really drawing down a lot. There was a lot fewer combat operations. The President Nixon had said, we need to start bringing our soldiers home and transitioning the war to the Vietnamese. So I was a mobile advisory team leader, an MAT, mobile advisory team, and I had 1 sergeant, and I would go out about for 5 to 7 days at a time with 1 sergeant. They'd pick me up, take me and my sergeant by a helicopter and drop us off towards the plain of reeds, towards Cambodia, or someplace to basically instruct how to call in airstrikes and artillery and weapons and communication to the Vietnamese. And one of the things, for instance, if you're going to throw smoke and mark your position, you can't say, I have yellow smoke out, because the bad guys would throw out yellow smoke too. You can't say, I have purple out, so he throws purple out. So one of the things I would teach him is, you don't say, I throw orange. You say, I'm going to throw banana. I got a grape for you today. You know, I got something really dark and sinister. You use phrases and terms that you and the pilot would understand, but the Viet Cong, who always listened in, weren't quite sure what you were trying to say. So I would teach that, come back in for about a week, and just hang out. It was pretty peaceful. Now our compound was heavily fortified. It was actually very small, but I had one room there. It had layers of barbed wire and a moat, but it was, you know, a nice kitchen. It used to hold like 60 or 80 Americans, and we were there, it was like 20 or 30. That was easy living. And so that was my first 6 months over there. And then in the infantry, back then you served 1 year in Vietnam. The Marines served 13 months, but the Army was 365 days, a 12-month tour. And typically, if you spent your first 6 months out, then it's at second 6 months they'd say, why don't you come into one of the higher level headquarters and have some kind of staff position?
Yeah.
But I'd already decided that even though I had an obligation for 4 years or more of active duty before I could even ask to be released, about going back to dental school. So I thought I can save a lot of money. If I go to one of the bigger cities, live in an air-conditioned office and so forth, I'll spend money, and I could live on $10 a month or less. Nothing. Just I ate with the Vietnamese, their rice and fish and so forth, and I thought, no, I'll stay out in the field. That's what I want to do. And they said, okay, then we'll send you a little further south to the Kamal Peninsula, down south of An Xuyen, which is the province there. That was a pretty tough place. It was, sometimes I think I was the southernmost American advisor in the whole country. So they dropped me off by helicopter to a little tiny compound with another officer and another sergeant there, and said, you're here for 6 months to be an advisor. So we lived in a little compound there, and we would go out on operations with them. We helped them do all kinds of things, and I was also their link to American air assets, like airstrikes and things like that. So we would go out on operations, and a lot of it, I also had a big bank account. And so when a little tiny Vietnamese village would say, we need something to dam up this stream, I'd say, I'll pay for it. I had Vietnamese money, and I'd say, I'll pay for it. Or they'd say, our well is run dry, and I'll go, I'll pay for a well. So I had basically all the cash I could possibly spend that way. There were no controls on that.
And what were the people like? Tell me about the people there.
People all over, I have been all over the world. People are pretty much the same all over the world, especially the children. The Vietnamese, by then, they had been fighting this war since the Japanese came and took them over. So they weren't like the Americans that say, okay, let's get it over with, get it done. They go, my grandfather fought this war, now I'm fighting it. I'm going to fight it 2 to 4 hours a day at most. So they weren't all that interested in going out and doing things. So they had I guess you could say, a different set of values and goals. They would much rather sleep in at lunch, take a siesta, you know, and stay with their girls and wives and things like that, and drink their rice wine. They weren't very aggressive. Right. It almost seemed to be that the bad guys, which were main force, and Viet Cong said, okay, we'll leave you alone, we got our other goals, you leave us alone, and we won't try to interact too much, and everybody's happy about that. And the Vietnamese were too. I had a lot of interesting adventures then for instance, in my first 6 months over there, I went up to the Plain of Reeds and I met a Jesuit priest in a little village. And I said, they're going to come kill you. He says, and he had a limp, he was an elderly gentleman, he was a Catholic Jesuit priest, and he says, I have a pistol. And I said, what's a pistol? That's nothing. So I gave him a submachine gun. I said, when they come, here, you have this, 3 magazines, you just hold the trigger down. And he said, thank you very much. And he's probably one of the few Jesuit priests that carried a 45 caliber M3 submachine gun. You do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And I used to do a lot of helicopter operations too, insertions, and sometimes for fun they'd say, do you want to go out tonight with the Loach pilots? Loaches are little tiny helicopters, and they'd say, we're going to drop grenades on them tonight. You want to go? And so there'd be a pilot. They were real cowboys. They wore the cowboy hats. Yeah. They shouted and screamed and hollered like cowboys. And so I'd sit on the edge of their little tiny helicopter with a sack of grenades, and he'd hover over in the Plain of Reeds, these little bunkers down in there, just right over him and say, see if you can drop a grenade down in that hole. And a couple of times I did this, but I thought, this is really stupid. Yeah. This is, I mean, I'm 10 feet over these people's heads. If they poke their head up, if I drop a grenade in this plane, I said, I don't think I really want to do this. So I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. Sure. I'm not going to volunteer for that. Sometimes there would be a shot down American helicopter, and we'd go out and try to recover them before the enemy did. Not only to get the wounded or dead Americans, but also to get the miniguns out. because a minigun fires 6,000 rounds a minute.
Right.
All you need is a battery to run it. You just hook up a battery and it turns the motor and everything else is mechanical. And the last thing you want to do is have one of those bad boys get taken over by the enemy. Always was a priority to recover the minigun, or at least blow it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I never got sick over there. I never had any kind of issues at all. I ate with the Vietnamese, I drank with the Vietnamese, I lived with the Vietnamese, and I guess I have a pretty sturdy immune system. I never got sick. Some of my friends over there got tuberculosis, hepatitis, all kinds of diseases.
It's pretty common for other Americans to get sick there.
Yeah, they were. I guess maybe I was just a little healthier than that.
Yeah.
My second 6 months, again, I was no longer a MAT team advisor, and when I went there, we had a major in charge. It was a district. It was 42,000 civilians in our district, the Sonodok district,
okay,
in An Xuan province, near that river. Well, right away he got sick and never came back, so I became a district senior advisor. And I had a lot of reports to fill out. In fact, when I read now about how they do reports to establish that areas in Afghanistan are more pacified and safer, and they get this data, I go, I know what they're doing. Same thing we did. We had these reports I'd sit down and fill out, and they would things like, how many terrorist attacks, how many grenades, how many weapons did you recover, how many prisoners? And you filled out a form. It was fairly complicated. You sent it forward, and they gathered that data. I suppose put it into computers, and they probably had these big maps showing more and more of the areas were pacified. And I go, you have no idea what's going on down here. You won't let me put on these what's really going on.
mm-hmm.
And so we would go out, and I probably can show you some pictures later on. Life is pretty simple. It's hot there. There is a rainy season when it floods like the monsoons, and then there's a dry season. We had a small little compound we built up a little bit, and in a small compound, and the Vietnamese, and for the second 6 months, they dug a moat, take the dirt and put it on the outside, and they put gun slits there, and their little house would be 4 or 5 feet tall and maybe 10 feet wide, and a Vietnamese soldier would live in there with his wife and family and shoot out through this little port, and of course there was moat and barbed wire and stuff like that. And we were in the middle of this little compound. There was probably only 300 feet by 300 feet, maybe less, and our helicopter pad was out of that.
Okay.
We used rainwater for bathing, and so when the rains came, when they would flood, we had a little corrugated aluminum roof. We'd strip down to our underwear, sometimes less, and direct the rainwater pouring down like crazy into our barrels. And then that's what we would use for bathing and watering and drinking and so forth. And we would carry the water up to the top of our little shower area and put some preservatives in it, or chlorine or something, and we had a little spout we could take showers and so forth. But it smelled bad because the moat underneath these people's houses was 10 feet away. There was no flow through there. It was incredibly stagnant, pungent, dead animals floating in it, dead dogs and rats and trash. The kids would swim in it, things like that, you know, so they're probably rampant hepatitis and things like that. One day I got a call and they said, they're coming down to inspect your place, and I'm cautioning you that they're going to make sure your water is adequately purified. So I quickly ran up there. It's a 55-gallon drum, and dumped about, usually you put 1 vial of this chlorine in there. I dumped like 5 or 6 in there. And later on in the day when they left, my interpreter, I had 2 interpreters, San and Khan. Khan or San went in there, of course they're black hair.
Yeah.
He came out a minute later, his eyes were burned and his hair was bleached completely blonde. So we had to dump all that out. But I thought, okay, San, I'm sorry about that, but it'll grow back just fine. And I ate with the Vietnamese. We had a Vietnamese girl who would cook for us and do our laundry. I had 1 sergeant who mostly stayed back. I would go out and have a radio. And if I needed to do something, I would contact him, and he had a more powerful radio that he could contact higher. But hardly anybody ever came to visit us down there. About every now and then we'd hear a helicopter hovering, and a helicopter pilot would say, I'm 1 minute out, I got some colonel who wants to look over your place. And so I had prepared little briefings. I had these charts, briefings, and I would give a briefing about this is my area, this is what is here, this is what we're doing. But what I would do is when the helicopter would hover in, and I usually had about a 1 or 2 minute warning, I'd give the signal to the little Vietnamese boys, and they would run out and get some big dead rats, which are as big as footballs. They're just huge because they're so full of rice, and they would fling them underneath the floor of our building, which was like this, except it was just plywood. So within a minute, the stench of those things coming up like that was ungodly. So they would sit down in these chairs, and I would pull up my charts and introduce myself and start on my charts and say, this is, I'm so-and-so, this is our province, and this is my command. Within a minute, they would turn green. These colonels and generals, they start gagging. I never had to complete a briefing. They would always say, looks like you got things in pretty good hand. We're gonna go ahead and head on up now. And he would leave, get on a helicopter and gasp and go up in the air. I give the signal, the guys crawl underneath there, get the dead rats, fling them out, good to go. So there are things you can do to hasten an interview with dead rats. It really works pretty good.
Tactical use of the senses.
Yes. And I had things, interesting things. For instance, the Vietnamese would offer me their women. So we would be on an operation, and they'd pause for lunch. It's fairly low key. And they'd say, do you want this girl or this one? And I'd go, I can't do that. It's not for me, I can't do that. It was wrong in so many different ways. And they would bring up girls and say, which one you want? We're going to have these 2 or 3. And the girls teenagers would paw the ground with their feet. So my interpreter eventually came back and said, they wonder if you're one of those Americans that likes men. I said, oh boy, now what? What am I going to do about this? So, back then there was a pin-up sort of thing, and I'll show you one of my posters. Rise Shaving Cream. If you send a note to the Rise Shaving Cream Company, you will get a signed letter back from the Rise Shaving Cream girl. So she sent me a letter back, and I mean, with this little black and white picture of the Rise Shaving Cream girl, and she wrote, to Hal, come back safe. So I posted it on the wall of my hooch. And so then when they would come in, they go, now we understand. With a woman like this, of course, you don't want our women. You know, it's not right. No wonder this is yours. So works for me, the Rise Shaving Cream girl, whoever she was. I ate with the Vietnamese. I ate rice and fish, and I got where I couldn't eat American food anymore. I didn't have American food. Now, every now and then, a helicopter would say, we got something for you. We got a couple cases of grenades, and they kick off some ammo, and they throw on some steaks. And so we would cook a steak. That was pretty uncommon, but I have pictures going, can you believe this? I have a steak. But by and large, I got where I couldn't eat American food. It was just too rich. Mm-hmm. And when you're with the Vietnamese, there's a lot of ceremonial sorts of relationships. Both on operations, you would go somewhere, you're always being invited to sit down and have dinner with them, lunch with them. And sometimes it wasn't very clean. And I remember once on an operation, we went out somewhere and we stopped for lunch, and there was this Vietnamese farmer with his wife there, and he had a cat, a little kitten. And I thought, I need a cat, because we have rats and mice, so I need a cat. So for a nickel, I bought the cat, put him in my ammo pouch, and brought him back. Well, he said, it is my honor to serve you lunch here. And he had one great big shrimp from somewhere. And I thought, oh, that looks so good. Hopefully he'll give me the shrimp. Well, he did, and the rice and all that. And he gave me the shrimp, and I took one bite, and it tasted like the scum off of an inside of an aquarium. I go, oh my God, how old is this shrimp? Well, I can't spit it out. I ate it, you know, and said it was delicious and so forth, and I never got sick. They drank a lot of rice wine over there. There was a lot of drinking, and once we went on an operation and stopped for lunch, and they're always bringing out the rice wine called Baside. Mm-hmm. So one day, unless I was thirsty, I must have drank way too much and just literally passed out. So they carried me back. Now, it takes about 4 or 5 Vietnamese to carry me back. So when my sergeant saw him carrying me in through the front berm, he thought I'd been shot. So he goes to the radio, and I said, no, I'm not shot. I just can't walk. So a Vietnamese medic came and was going to give me a bunch of shots with some charcoal, and I looked at that needle like, oh, you're not putting that in me. I can at least say, no, I'm not getting whatever's on that needle, I don't want any part of it. So I just sobered up and was okay. So I have a lot of pictures of drinking and toasting and things like that. And I still really like what you would call ramen noodles.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of, they would just get river water, but boil it. You know, right out of the stream, well, it wasn't streams, a swamp in the back full of husks and bits of God knows what. Pour it over the needles, show and throw in some pork or hot peppers, a little nook mom. And for about, it only cost me a nickel, so I ate that every day for lunch. Also, one day the Vietnamese said, we need some more grenades. So I put in a request and said, bring me next time the helicopter comes by, kick me off some grenades. So the helicopter came by and kicked off some ammunition. I opened up a case of grenades, a crate. It was World War II pineapple-style grenades. I thought, these things are from 1943. I had no way I'm using these things. I gave them the Vietnamese. They immediately thanked me, went down to the river and used them for fishing. Throw them in the water, bang, the fish float to the surface,
Wow.
and bring them in. I thought, it's okay, it's your war, I'm not going to use them anyway. My transportation in my second 6 months, I didn't have a vehicle, there were no roads there, it was all waterway. What I had a Boston Whaler with twin Johnson 40s on it, but it had been so full of holes it was pretty waterlogged. And I had twin Johnson 40 motors that had been worked on so many times that they didn't run very well, and the reason we had two on it so we could try to keep one of them running. And I actually became a pretty good Johnson 40 horsepower outboard motor mechanic. And things vibrated off these motors all the time. So I wrote a letter to the Loctite company, which makes thread sealants.
Right, right.
And I said, can you help me? And they sent me a couple of bottles of their Loctite so I could put that on the threads of things to make it stay together. And I've always thought, I appreciate that. They just came in the mail. There you are, soldier. So we would go out on our little Johnson boat like that, and they always overloaded it. We'd pack as many soldiers, Vietnamese soldiers, in our boat with their weapons. And I thought, this is no speed at all. We're only going about 3 miles an hour, and one little wave will all sink and drown here. But I thought speed is safety, but they always filled it up. I had two interpreters, Con and San. And San spoke as fluent English as you and I do. He was actually North Vietnamese. He actually had a number of American medals for heroism. Before I got there, he had, my unit, the unit I was with, a couple of guys, they went down by the sea to a compound there and spent the night there, and was overrun that night by the enemy. So they're in a bunker, and you never have a straight-in door. You have things like this, so nobody can fire in directly. It's a way around it. Well, the Americans were in there, and he had a girlfriend, so he'd gone downtown, well, to the village. So when it was overrun that night, and the Americans were dying in there and couldn't respond, he had a radio. He called in, San called in the airstrikes to force the bad guys to Kong and Main Force to leave. So he got some medals. And San also was on the helicopter that picked up Nick Rowe. Nick Rowe was captured very near where I was, along the U Minh Forest in 1963, along with Rocky Versace, who was later awarded the Medal of Honor. He was kept in a cage for 5 years, and he escaped during a B-52 raid in 1968 or 69. And he's an American hero. He wrote a book called 5 Years to Freedom. He was later assassinated by communists in the Philippines about 15 years ago. Well, anyway, the only reason Nick Rowe wasn't killed, when he runs out onto this area on the edge of the forest, an American helicopter comes in to gun him. And as they go to do this, they go, he's got a full beard. Vietnamese don't have facial hair. They go, that's an American. They picked him up, and San was on that helicopter. And he said, when he got on the helicopter, they yanked him on. He couldn't talk. He couldn't speak English. He hadn't spoken much English in 5 years. So he said all he could do was cry and hold on to him, and he couldn't speak English. And so I've always remember my connection to Nick Rowe was through San, my interpreter. I also had another interpreter called Con. Con was kind of high-strung. They're actually Vietnamese soldiers who were assigned to me. I also had a 5-man bodyguard team too. Con was kind of high-strung, San was laid back. So one day we'd go down to get on our Boston Whaler, went out, it was tied up down by the river there, and I said, San, we forgot the gas. Go back up and get the gas. He says, no. I said, Con, don't give me a hard time. Just go back and get the gas tank. We'll get this thing ready to go and go out today. He says, I won't do it. I said, Con, you can't tell me that. You know, I am an officer, and you are an interpreter, and you have to do what I tell you to do. Go get the gas can. And he said, no. I said, I'm going to tell you one last time. I'm going to give you a direct order. Con, go back and get the gas can, because if you don't, I'll fire you, and you will go back to the Vietnamese you came from, and you know what that means. And he threw a tantrum. I said, you're fired. I had to fire my interpreter. A week later, on an operation with him, Con stepped on a landmine and blew off his legs. And I've always thought, Con wanted to run after the war a little Honda motorcycle shop. Didn't going to happen. If he'd have only gone back and got the gas can.
And do you know why he didn't?
He just had a day. He just had a day. It wasn't his day. Maybe he had a bad night or a fight with a girlfriend. But I said, Con, I'm warning you. That's my word is your command. And I've always thought, why didn't he go get the gas can? Cost him his legs and his life. So our transportation was with our Boston whalers down there, and every now and then the enemy would booby trap them, put something underneath them or whatever. So we never just climbed in them or checked the wires. We always looked them over very carefully. We also had a lot of fun with weapons. I like to shoot a lot. I had a lot of captured weapons. I had 5 different submachine guns, American, French, Chinese, things like that. We used to shoot them all the time. But when I went out, I mostly carried a radio and a pistol. Even though I had an M16, I thought there's plenty of these weapons around. If I need one, I'll use one of theirs. I need the radio. And one day we got a note that just across the river, maybe a click or two away, means a kilometer, one of our little compounds was overrun at lunch. We need to go there. So they rounded up the rescue team, and my unit, well, not my unit, the Vietnamese set out across the river, and they crossed the river and go over there, and I'll show you some pictures of that.
Sure.
But here's the way the South Vietnamese tended to fight the war. They would put a small little triangular compound where they thought someplace needed to be to perhaps protect the edge of the village, a little bridge. Very small. They would be that end of your house to this end, bunkers and wire. But what they would do is they would usually sleep. At lunchtime, they'd have their wives and girlfriends in there. They'd cook something and they'd all take a nap. Well, what happens is the Viet Cong would leave them alone for a while. So the friendly Vietnamese would become very complacent, no guards, nothing. And the bad guys literally walk in through the front door and just shoot them, run down, throw grenades in their little bunkers, kill them, blow them up, set them on fire, grab the weapons, the radios, and they're out in 60 seconds. That's what they would always do. They never had a battle because they weren't going to come through the wire. They just walked in the front door. So we got there and we look over there and they're dragging out the bodies and stuff, and all of a sudden the Vietnamese started talking and running and diving for the ground, and I said to my interpreter, "Why is that?" And he says, "Well, we're about to get artillery support and somebody made a mistake. It's coming on us. Get down." So we ducked, and I got some explosions I'll show you. But they were off just a little bit with supporting artillery, but it was just around us, and I thought, you know, this is some dangerous work here.
So you're almost a victim of friendly fire.
Yeah, that's one way to put it, because the Vietnamese gave them the wrong coordinates.
Yeah.
As you can see on my map, you know, you're off 100 yards or 300 yards. Here's another example of wastefulness. As you can see, I'll show you later, the standard artillery piece down there is a 105 howitzer. And 105 howitzers come, well, with a big cartridge. And the cases are not brass. They're just a wrapped piece of metal. They have no value at all. But one day, we got a shipment in on a boat, and it was all brass World War II ammo. It was probably 600 rounds of brass. That's a lot of value. So immediately, they fired off all 600 rounds, just out in the jungle, out in the woods. And then after that afternoon, after they fired all that ammo, the battery commander in charge of it had them load it up, put it on his little barge, and take it up to the city and sell it for scrap. And I go, you know, that's a waste of ammunition.
Wow.
All you did was shoot it off. God knows where it went out there. And so now you can sell the scrap and make a profit. I guess you can call that graft and corruption, but that's how they fought the war.
And what do you think the value of all that to...
That was a lot.
Yeah.
They finally opened it up and they said, this is brass. We're going to fire this off right now. And then one day I said, let's do a little, I'm going to show you a little bit about some shooting here with artillery. Let's shoot a couple of rounds way out in no man's land. No friendlies are out there. We fired off some rounds. That afternoon they bring in a boy, his foot was blown off from this. I go, what were you doing out there? You know, it was one of those accidents. I had a 5 or 6 man, I guess you could say, bodyguard team.
Okay.
Some of them were Cambodian. In fact, one of my best bodyguards was ex-Viet Cong. And he had an M16 with an XM203 grenade launcher underneath it. I'd never seen one. I don't know where he got it. But anyway, he was actually Viet Cong, and he'd been with a Viet Cong unit a few years before. And they got caught out along a tree line by an American helicopter, and they all got shot up, and he's the only one that lived. And he said, I'm on the wrong side. So he became what's called a Chu Hoi, which is the phrase for come on our side, surrender, Chu Hoi. So I'm guarded by switched his loyalty to us that day. And I didn't speak Cambodian with him or something. He didn't have any teeth, a couple of wives in the compound. But he was as loyal as they can be. And the little Vietnamese squad I had, about 5 or 6 of them, they were tough as nails. They were ruthless. They were brutal. They had no compunction shooting people in the back, killing them, things like that. They were tough. They were tough and very different than the average Vietnamese who said, I'll just draw my pay and sleep in my hammock all day and no one will pay attention to me at all. So that was my tour in Vietnam, and I always kind of get a joke that my tour was to be 1 year, but 1972 was leap year, so I did 366 days. The Army got their extra day. So I get a call and they said, Hal, you're done. We're going to send a helicopter to pick you up. So the only belongings I had were the clothes I had on, my camera, which I shot a lot of pictures of, and that's one little set of, I didn't have any American clothes. Helicopter picked me up. A day or two later, I'm in Saigon, out processed. Plane takes me back, and I land at San Francisco International Airport. And I spent a couple days with my dad in Nebraska, and I went back to Fort Bragg, and then I went to SF, Special Forces then.
And what was the reception by your friends' family back home? You know, I know we hear a lot about Vietnam with it not being a very popular war. What was that like as a soldier, both while you were there and when you came home? What was going through your mind about that?
Well, I'll show you. I brought this home. When I came home, I had no civilian clothes. I didn't have so much as a white handkerchief. I literally came home in an old set of khakis, and I brought home one set of jungle fatigues. And I brought home this rifle. It's a Chinese Communist Type 53 carbine. Now, this one's safe. So I walk into the airport there, and I'm just trying to, okay, I got to catch a flight back to Lincoln, Nebraska. And about 4 or 5 of these guys ran up to me with a bottle full of their pee, and they were kind of yelling and hollering, going to throw it on me. I'll show you something here. Yep. So I said, you throw that on me and I'll kill you. I'll kill you where you stand.
Wow.
And they turned around and ran away. And so I still have this rifle. But anyway, let me click it up here.
Sure.
It goes up like that. I'll put it over here. Anyway, so that's what it was like to come back from that war. People would call you baby killer and all that. And I go, you know, I could tell you a lot of atrocities on the enemy side too. I know a lot about what those people do. Wars are brutal. They just are. So that's what it was like. Yeah. Then I went to Fort Bragg and signed up for Special Forces and became a Special Forces 18 commander for 1.5 years, which was a really good tour. Got to go all over the world doing that too. 2 of my men on my Special Forces team won the Medal of Honor.
Wow.
Now, they had done this before in Vietnam, and they assigned in my 14-man A team, but they were broken men. You know, you're thinking of a Medal of Honor winner as some hero guy or something, and I knew some of those too. Not these men. They were broken. Alcoholic, beaten down, going to die early. And so I finally went back to the headquarters of my Special Forces unit, 5th Group, and I said, you need to take these guys back. I can't do anything with them. And they said, we'll take them back. We'll take good care of them. And so the Special Forces back then, the Army then was a very difficult place to be in. It still was. But in Special Forces when I was there, this would be the early 70s, it was the only place that anybody who wanted to be in the Army could actually be in the Army. We were a separate little isolated part where most of my men they were all single or divorced. And of my team, some of my men, they would go back and forth to Vietnam. And SF then was very relaxed. We would go out and do some fun operations, but it was mostly relaxation and R&R until they go back and do another SF tour in Vietnam. And some of my men had 2 wives. They had an American wife and an American family in Fort Bragg, and they had a Vietnamese wife and a Vietnamese children in Vietnam. Wow. They go back and forth. You'd be over there 6 months or a year, come back for a few months. I knew this, you know, and so that was their life, and they were good soldiers, very dedicated and loyal, and I much preferred to be around them than what was going on in the military then. Back then, soldiers were embarrassed to be off post, so they would wear wigs and conceal their identity that they were in the military until our great leaders of the military said, this has got to change, and put a whole philosophy into effect. And society changed too, and now you can see that the pride and respect of our military, it wasn't like that then. Mm-hmm. But that's what it was like then.
So when you were with the Special Forces, did you do actual missions? Did you go out in the field with them, or did you train them?
Well, it was pretty relaxed then. It isn't. I think now that SF is very demanding. It's very professional, very not rigid probably, but does a lot of things we didn't do. So I'd come over to the unit about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, check in with my men. And then we'd go have a nice brunch over at the officers club, come back, maybe go swim for a while, maybe go shoot, check out some weapons and shoot or something. So it was really, and we would do some minor training operations. We went over, we did some training operations with the Turkish Special Forces, parachute here and there, you know, keep my jump training up. It was pretty easy living. It's probably much more demanding now. I never went back overseas that I recall with SF. Well, actually I went over to Africa for a while with them. But no, there wasn't any more combat operations then, because it was a time of relative peace, I guess you could say.
So tell me, you mentioned Africa. Tell me about what you did there. What was the goal of that?
Well, the Army likes to train, and SF's got 3 missions. It's not like SEAL Team 6 or anything like that. In SF, you're primarily an advisor. You're a force multiplier. So the thought in Special Forces, you go somewhere and gather the loyalty of the local people there to become on your side and fight for your side. So that's their primary mission. They have some other missions too. So there's training like that. So I was one night at a party. I was just about to leave Fort Bragg to go back to, by then I was already a doctor then, because I'd gone to medical school on my GI Bill. So I went back there. He said, "Do you want to go to Africa tomorrow with us for about 6 weeks?" And I said, "Sure." He says, "Well, meet me at the airport, we'll go." So I called my commander at the hospital. I said, "Do you mind if I go to Africa for 6 weeks?" He said, "Sure." So 8 hours later, I was on a plane with a bunch of men to go to Morocco and work with some training and operations over there. I'll go back a little bit.
Sure.
When I was in Vietnam, already I was beginning to think about going to dental school, but I had this military commitment. But I thought, I was an English major in college. I've got to learn how to do physics and chemistry and organic and all that. How am I going to learn to do that? So I started taking Army-funded correspondence courses for chemistry and physics. And so I carried in my rucksack a chemistry book or a physics book, and I had a slide rule, and then in between operations, even out in the field, when I had a few minutes, I would practice doing problems. I have to learn how to do these problems in these chapters. So I have pictures of me sitting on a berm with my rifle against, you know, my feet in the mud working problems in these books. I studied, I've got to learn how to do this. Well, I had a slide rule, a small metal picket slide rule. So I would use that, and the Vietnamese soldiers would come up and say, "What is that for?" And I said, "This tells the future." And they would say, I would say, "Do you know how many sons you will have?" I'd say, "I'll show you." My slide rule, "You have 4 sons. How long will I live?" "Not so good. Small number." "Long life. How many wives will I have?" "I have 4 wives." So they thought this was magic and could tell the future. Fine by me. It was a lot of fun. So when I got out of I was already studying and trying to work hard to maybe go back to dentistry, but I had this commitment. So I used my GI Bill after I got out of SF to go back to Nebraska. And by then I was active duty and guard and reserve to go to pre-med for a year and a half and then medical school. So I never had, every vacation, every summer, every 2-week, every weekend, I was fortunate the reserves and National Guard would put me on active duty. I never had a vacation. I never took an R&R in Vietnam. You get 2 in Vietnam, an in-country at China Beach or Vung Tau, or an out-of-country, and a lot of them go to Saigon, Bangkok. Married ones went to Hawaii. The single officers went to Bangkok, and they always came back with gold dog tags and a case of gonorrhea. And I said, I don't need either of those. So I never took an R&R. I just stayed in the bush in 2 places and saved my money. I thought, those are not things I need to have. So I was already pretty committed to saving money and having some distant, far-reaching goals. So then I went to medical school and then did a residency in University of Colorado. And I still went to Guard and Reserve and summer camps and things like that. By then I was a doctor in pediatrics, much of that paid for by the Army. So I didn't come out with any debt at all. And then I decided I wanted to do 2 years of pediatric kidney disease, so the Army paid for that. So I did a fellowship in Denver for 2 years. And then, of course, I had to go back on active duty to repay that. So I went back to Fort Bragg again. I think that was my 3rd time at Bragg. And I was at Bragg for about 2 years. Becky was born there. And then when I was there, I could have gone to Grenada, but somebody else went for that. And then after that, I went to Kansas, where I was there for about 12 years. I've been in this community for 17 years. And again, in Kansas, I was an Army Reserve doctor, and then Desert Storm came along. So I went in a reserve hospital unit, the 410 evac, was one of the physicians there. And I remember when the Kuwait invasion happened and Saddam Hussein took it, and the president began to calling up our units, and President Bush began to form a coalition. When he finally said that I heard on the news that he activated 3 more Army divisions to be deployed, I told my wife, I'll get a call tomorrow. Because most of the Army medical resources and care is actually in the Guard or Reserves. I will get a call within 12 or 24 hours that we've been activated. A couple hours later, I get a phone call. Get your stuff together, we got activated. I said, I knew it. So then my hospital unit in Topeka, Kansas was called up, and very quickly, it's a 400-man hospital. We went over to Fort Riley, Kansas in the dead of an icy cold, below freezing winter, and got our stuff together and training and things like that. And we waited around for transportation to go to Desert Storm. Well, everything goes by ship or air, and it has to funnel through that. How do you get divisions and all the resources and everything out of Europe in there? And finally our turn came. So Christmas Eve, we got word that we have an advance party of 25 people being shipped over there. It's an advance party to begin to make coordination and details. Hospital commander says, I want you to go. You're going to go as my chief of staff, along with another major. I was a colonel then, I think. And about 15 men or 20 men that are truck drivers to gather stuff. So he and I went over, and I called my wife. I only had a couple of hours. She came, I gave my kids a kiss, you know, I drew a weapon, I was gone.
This is on Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve.
Wow.
Yeah, so I get a call, and 4 hours later I'm on a plane. You know, I barely had time to get my stuff gathered and so forth. My wife drove the 60 miles with my kids, hopped on a plane, and next thing you know, I'm landing in Dhahran Desert Storm with my men. Now, this is my second war, but this is our men, the small little, I think there's about 15 of us, the Kobar Towers. And we were drawing trucks and things like that, and getting ready, and I don't have a lot to do there. The men can't wait to load their weapons. I wouldn't let them do it. I thought, we are not going to have an accident here. We had cases of ammo. Said, we're not loading any weapons. You can't do it. It's not safe.
So they're very anxious.
Oh, they're young men. They can't wait to load up. I mean, a war's coming. I mean, it's tough to beat a war for excitement. It's about tops. So anyway, then they said, okay, you need to get your trucks. You're going to go 400, 350 or 400 miles out in the desert to put a hospital. So I said, okay, you can load your weapons. Well, they didn't know how to load the magazines. So I said, okay, you don't put these things in one by one. I'll show you how to use stripper clips and things. I gave them some rules, and they dove on those things. It was like boys in a candy shop. And I thought, you know, I guess I've been there once in my life too. So then we took some trucks, and I had a Humvee, and I had a Humvee license, a military Humvee, and a truck, and they said, you go first. So I drove 600 miles. Was it 600 miles? 500 miles without stopping in a Humvee with that truck behind me. And the war is going to start in a couple more days. So the civilian populace of Saudi Arabia is flooding back towards us. So I'm driving down the middle of a road, and they're coming on both sides of me, trucks and vehicles. It's harrowing.
So you're like a salmon swimming upstream.
Yeah, against trucks and vehicles and fleeing, and they're coming across the desert and animals and stuff. And I drove till about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I finally get out in the desert. You can't use lights.
Right.
They have little blackout lights where like a candle. They're not even a candle at the front because we're up close to the lines. It is dark and raining and muddy. It's flat. Can't see a thing. And I finally say, I can't drive anymore. I just can't drive anymore. I got another officer, but I trusted myself driving more than he. So the truck's behind us, and I just slumped over in the steering wheel for about an hour and then woke up. And it's still, there's no moon or anything like that. So then some military police comes by, and this is all dark, no lights, and I said, we're looking for so-and-so. He says, it's over that way. Head over that way a few clicks. So I get my compass, and we drive over there, and we drive right into the middle of this little compound with barbed wire and all this kind of stuff. It's a little supply compound. And we said, we're looking for so-and-so headquarters. And they go, how did you get in here? We got barbed wire all around this place. I never saw any barbed wire. We just drove in. They go, how did you do that? I don't know. We'll have to walk you out. So they took us to the gate and said, see that dim light over there? It's a big supply tent. Go over there. So we did go over there. As we got close to it, drove down into a burn ditch. It got stuck in our vehicles there, but we were home. So then we were there, I think about 6 or 8 weeks, putting up our hospital, drawing supplies, our advance party. And I worked like anybody else. Cold and wet. There's no bathing. You're eating cold, greasy meals and stuff like that. But it's what we like to do. It's what we do. And I remember once getting a tray full of hot food and putting it on the fender of a truck, and it's sleeting in the rain, and I got another officer next to me, and this grease congeals, and it looks like something out of a dog food can, and we looked at each other. We're hungry.
Yeah.
It's something you would never touch.
Yeah.
We laughed our heads off, put more Tabasco on it, ate it.
Wow.
So we were muddy and wet. In fact, if you're wet and cold all the time, it's like your bone marrow gets cold. You just are always cold. So I could never get warm. It just seeps into your bones.
So what did you do there to deal with that? What did you do for recreation? Did you have any recreation?
Well, at that point in time, we worked dawn to dusk, or any daylight hour. We have to mark our hospital. In fact, this general came out to us men and said, put your hospital, put it here. Looked around. This is as flat. You can't imagine how flat. When you look at flat, you can almost see the curve of the earth. It is flat, hard-packed sand with little rocks. You go, okay, we'll put a hospital here.
Hospital right out of the sand.
We have trucks and vehicles, and it's tentage hospital with boxes that pop out with generators and so forth. And our hospital unit is 400 people, but we're only 25. So we do what we can. We got to put up some tents, and it's muck, and our tents are full of mud coming over the top of your boots. Your cots sleep into it. You're wet, cold, but we're working hard to begin to assemble this. And then the main unit comes in. They come in on trucks, about, I don't know, 450 of them or whatever, and about half of them are women. They're nurses. Mm-hmm. And they show up, and by then we have, the bulldozers had put up a berm, so we had a berm to work in to protect us from direct fire. And so we'd already had established some communications and things, so now we got everybody here to start really putting this hospital together, and they worked hard. And I remember that a bunch of the soldiers said, we would like to call our wives. And I said, okay, but we have to drive about an hour to a tent that's in a muddy area that's got phones they put in. We didn't have, there was no cell phones for us then. They didn't have the internet or anything. And I said, I can take about 2 truckloads, that's all. That's about, out of you 400 people, I'm not going to stand here and say, you can call your wife and you can't. You choose. So I told every little section chief to send 1 person to me in a half hour at the trucks. I'll let you decide. So all these little groups of 5 and 10 and 15 people, these little units within our hospital, it was up to them to say, you call and tell them we're okay. Give them the numbers. So I worked fine. I put them on a truck. We drove for hours. Got to a place and mud was flowing over. It's like soup because all the tanks are rolling through there and the trucks. It's like soup. It's like 18 inches of soup flowing over your boots. It's blowing and sleeting and dark and cold. And they go into these tents that are dark. And they have the MPs. You have to turn your weapon to them when you walk away. You cannot go in there with a weapon.
Right. And
they give you about 3 or 4 minutes to make a phone call. Then they clear the tent. Well, the reason they don't want you having a weapon in there, someone says, I'm still talking to my wife. Well, you're not armed. He is. So the MPs chase them out. They don't want anybody arguing with them. Right. So anyway, so then I have all these, I don't know, about 30 or so male and female soldiers, and they go, we got to go to the bathroom. I said, well, go. And they go, where are we going to go? I said, squat and go. I said, tell you what. And these girls are going, how do we do this? I said, tell you what. It's dark, not any moon. Girls on the right side of the truck, men on the left side of the truck. Just do your business and get in the truck. Well, they got used to that. I mean, those kind of things are just the way life is there. They're squatting down in the mud and their tushes and everything. I go, they'll learn, they'll learn. I've been over here 6 weeks, they'll learn. And then the war started, the air war started first, and we were still busily building our hospital, getting it up, and the air conditioners, surgical units, and living quarters and all that. And then the ground war started, and we started getting casualties. And a lot of them, our hospital actually saw 35,000 patients in our little evac hospital. And people think nobody got killed in that war. Well, a lot of our business was refugee or prisoner of war and Americans. Mm-hmm. For instance, the desert, when they got dry, all of a sudden it goes from wet season to dry season like one day. All of a sudden you go from muck to dust. And dust, it's like talc. When you think of dust, it's like talc. It gets into everything. Well, when the helicopters would land on our little area, the dust would come up. It's very hard on our motors. They couldn't see.
Right.
So we took some of our trucks and put out, the Saudis supplied diesel fuel for our service. We dumped out a few thousand gallons of diesel fuel on the sand so the helicopters could land. Now, OSHA would never let you dump 5,000 gallons of diesel out there. We did. It worked fine for us. Yeah. So a lot of our patients would come in either by the Chinook or by Black Hawk medevac or something, and our guys would go out there, bring them into our tent. And we would get sometimes 20 or 30 at a time. And a hospital, like most hospitals, if they have a bus that gets hurt and there's 8 of them, it's called a mass casualty. They have a hard time taking care of that. I could get 25 or 30 in at one time and nothing to it. And basically, since I was a pediatrician, I was chief of staff. So the doctors and the anesthesiologists and oral surgeons, they all worked for me. I had like 25 of them. And then there was probably about 80 or so nurses that worked under the head nurse, and everything else supports that. Supply, communications, and administration. So when we set up our emergency room tent, it was a long tent, and so when they would carry him in, as they would walk the soldier down carry him on the litters, my doctors would jump right on him, and as they begin to triage him and say, "What's wrong with you?" Sometimes they come with tags on them, sometimes they don't. They're taking their clothes off, and as they begin to triage him right there, you can wait, you got to go. We had like, I think 4 or 5 operating rooms, so they would carry him through, and being in an operating room under anesthesia within 60 to 90 seconds after they hit the front door, and no hospital in this country can do that. And we could deal with 25 or 30 of them at a time. Blast, burn. Sometimes Americans would hit a tank, and they'd go over there and look down and they'd go, "These guys are bad off." And they'd throw them on the airplane, and they'd come in. And I got pictures of that, I'll show you. Blast amputations, burns, things like that. When you're in a tank and it gets hit by an American armor-piercing round, the whole thing blows up. People step on mines, automobile accidents. We also had births in our hospital. We had Saudi Arabian, not Saudi Arabian women, but women who were brought in wounded or something like that from just across the border, Iraqi women. And sometimes it was pretty sad. Some woman would be in badly injured, and someone would say, "She has a baby, has a child and a baby. Where's the baby?" I said, "No baby came in." I said, "If there's a baby, it's still out there." And we had children die in our hospital. They would come in too far gone to save. And that was what I did. I did that sort of work. And you only do what you can do. But no American ever died in my hospital that arrived with a heartbeat. If they came with a heartbeat, not one of them died in my hospital, and we saw some grievous wounds. And we also were near a Saudi Arabian prisoner of war camp where Iraqis were surrendering in mass. So they would put them in an area, put barbed wire around them and say, "Stay here," throw rations into them, thousands of them. Well, sometimes they didn't like the rations they were given. They'd throw them back. Well, the Saudis would shoot them. So we'd go over there and they'd bring over a bunch of Iraqis that got shot by the Saudis, their guards, because they just didn't like them. Yeah. So we had to say, "Quit shooting them. We're handling all the work we can. Just quit shooting all your prisoners." So we did that kind of work, automobile accidents, and we were up early. And then as that war wound down, then we were one of the last hospitals up. Other hospitals would close, and finally they came and said, "Your hospital can shut down now." So it had to all be cleaned up and put back together. And then my hospital commander says, "You came 6 weeks early. Do you want to go home now?" So I said, "Sure." He says, "Well, take the same 20-odd guys that you brought over." So got on a truck and flew into actually Columbia. And flew into Columbia here on a jet. And then we're going back to Topeka. And Columbia, we went to this big building, and I said, "I got 20 men, I need to get back to Topeka." And the girls at the county says, "No way we can do it. We got all these other soldiers, these replacements, these trainees." So I turned around, there's probably 50 or 100 just finishing basic, and they're standing around, milling around to these desks, and I told them all to sit down. I said, "Everyone, you sit down." And I'm not taking any guff from anybody. And I turn around to the girl and says, "I've cleared your building. Now, get my men back there." So she says, "Well, that works." They didn't say a word.
Yeah.
So anyway, a few minutes later, she said, "Trump Airlines is going to fly." And people can say what they want about Mr. Trump, but you know what? He sent one of his planes to pick us up. So we go out to the airfield, one of his Trump Airlines, and he flew us back to Topeka. The Army paid for it, but he found us an airplane. So one of the other officers said, "Did you see how Hal sat all those men down?" And someone said he's got size 13 boots. They're not going to argue with that. So that's my 2 wars. Then I finished serving. I did a total of 30. It actually comes out to about 12 and a half years of active duty. I spent about 5 years outside the United States. In my Guard and Reserve time, a lot of times the United States government, before the Iraqi and Afghan war came, our hospital units were often sent, instead of going just a 2-week summer camp, we would often go to South America on a medical mission. We would take supplies and medics and a dental team, and they'd take us up into some mountain valley, El Salvador, Guatemala, way up into some place. And it was really very interesting work to do that, because some of these people had no medical care at all. And we brought medicines, and we did what we could, and we did some really nice things for those people that could often help. A little bit. And the most patients I ever saw in one 5-hour day was 370. I examined and treated 370 patients in 5 hours. I can't do that in this country, but I could do it there.
Very efficient.
Yeah, I remember some of those little things that I could do. I can make this better for you. Your kid's dying of scabies. He's so infected. I'll make it better. Just take me a couple seconds to make that better. I have all kinds of those things. So in 1969, I entered the Army in 1969, and in 1999, I was retired after my 30 years. And now, I'm fully retired. So that's my military story.
Yeah. So how would you say that these experiences have affected your life? Obviously, it's taken up a large portion of it, and we thank you so much for serving our country and enduring our freedom. How would you say that those experiences, when you walk around today, just being a civilian, how would you say that it changes your viewpoint on everything?
Well, here's one thing. When I went back to medical school, a lot of students, I'm older than them now, I've been in the military, would say it's spring break. I can't study anymore. I can't do it. I go, I can make myself do anything. Whether it's do this or do that, no matter if I need to study, if I have to do it, I can make myself study. I knew how to be relentless and goal-driven and directed. I knew, I guess you could say, Ranger School teaches your limits. So I knew what my limits were, and I could make myself, whether it's studying or endurance or learning or something like that, I was committed. So as a young man, by then I was 27 years old, I felt I was pretty mature and driven and committed. So that's one thing I got out of that. My everyday life now, well, first of all, I get military retired benefits, which is really nice. But when I look at what my country goes through in convulsions and civil disobedience, and I have respect for all that, what the values of the people that established this country then and now. Our country does evolve, and I'm proud to be an American. And most Americans take a lot of things for granted. I mean, I've lived in a hut, I've lived under circumstances, and I've lived under things that most people wouldn't understand today. And so when people gripe and complain about this, I go, you have to keep your mouth shut, because you're lucky to have it as well as you do. So I do fly my flag at my house. When they play the Pledge of Allegiance, I stand absolutely rocket straight. I put my hand on my heart. I often think about some of my friends that are on that wall in the Vietnam Wall, because I have friends of mine I knew well, and others too. They went missing and they never came back. And what the things I have and have experienced that as young men were lost to them forever. So it's made me a better person. I think it's made me more tolerant in many ways of what other people might be very frustrated about. I'm pretty tolerant of what it needs to be an American. But I have a lot of expectations of Americans as people too that I wish we could do better with.
And talk a little bit about the cultural changes between the time period when you went over with Vietnam and say when you went over with Desert Storm.
There's a really big difference. In fact, that's interesting. I've told you what it was like to come back from Vietnam. I knew it was, before I went over there, I knew what it was like. Yeah. And when I was over there, I read about Jane Fonda cavorts on a North Vietnamese anti-aircraft gun. I would never permit Jane Fonda to come in my house. And so, man, other people like that, I just go, you're privileged to say that because you're an American, but doesn't mean I got to respect you for it. You're allowed to do it. It's our Constitution, so you're right. But I never would ever tolerate in my house some of those kind of things. Yeah. So that's what it was like. But the military got better. I've seen it do that. And when I came back from Desert Storm, riding on a bus from the airfield to Fort Jackson here, where I had to get my men another airplane, I saw these banners and signs. And I go, it's true. They really do it. It's not like it was. I was just amazed. I was like, this is so different than the other war. Yeah. And now, when my license plate on my car is NAMVET. And people will come up to me when I'm getting gas now and say, thank you for your service, or something like that. And I tell them, thank you very much. There's a lot greater respect for while you may not agree with what your country does and its goals, that's our political right to do that, to dissent. But the men and women that go actually give their sacrifice and their time and their family to do it, our country, fortunately, I believe by and large, has a great respect and appreciation for what they do, if not for their cause.
All right, well, Dr. Copple, I thank you so much for your time, and thank you for serving our country. And if there's anything else you'd like to cover, more than welcome to do that.
Well, I'm very privileged. I got to see the world. When I'm in a store, maybe that has a globe, my wife's doing something, I just like to spin the globe, and I go, I've been there, been there, been there. I was there, parachuted into there, parachuted into there, swam into there. It's been a good life. I'm very pleased with my life. I'm very content with my life, from what I've accomplished and what I've seen, my family and myself. And I like being an American. I don't want to be anybody else. Wouldn't trade it for anything. Thanks, Will. Thanks for the honor and privilege of sitting here with you today.
Thank you so much.
And you can see what a representative sample is.
Sure. Go for it.
Okay, that's a fairly rich area. That's the first. That's just that's Market Square, 105. See the shells that just got thrown out? On the right there. Okay, cleaning weapons. And I could give you a story about the one on the right. But anyway, cleaning weapons. Little tiny compound there. I mean, just going. I always thought it was pretty dangerous because the bad guys could be 10 feet away, and what can you do in that boat? Nothing. And that's Son. He's going up to Son, one of my interpreters.
Okay.
He's going up if I see his girlfriend. And see the barbed wire on the right? That's the command inside our compound. So that's RPG wire. So
wow.
RPGs would hopefully hang up in the wire. They just wove it like that instead of hitting the command center.
And does that keep it from going off?
And hopefully, well, it might. It might just hang there like that. A lot of this is my district. That's an American who came later. That's me on the left. That's somebody's wife. That's district.
So that's you on the left there?
Yeah. And here we are at one that we're just having. You notice how much little clothes we wear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just having. These are some Vietnamese interpreters at another place. And typical house. You know, it's a Vietnamese family living there, a little child. That's my boat. And my twin 40s, getting ready to go somewhere. Yeah, a little whaler there.
Yeah.
And now that's inside of a compound. That would be a triangular corner. See the bunker there, stuff like that. And then that doesn't show. If it was dark, that's just what they look like. That won't show, but tiny little places. Okay, we're going to get ready to go on an operation. That's my squad right there, getting lined up, ready to go. That's inside my compound. And now this one just got overrun.
Okay.
So we show up. This is the one that they walked in, chucked their grenades on, grabbed their radios and weapons. They're out in 60 seconds. See the little tower? They were just all taking a nap at lunch. They were pointing out something, and all the bodies are in there and stuff like that. Women, children, just kill them all.
Wow.
And there's some of that artillery. I go, okay, we got to get down there. Who knows where that one's going to land?
Yeah. And I forgot to ask you earlier, what was your experience with napalm and stuff? Did they use that?
I didn't.
Didn't
it works. And you know what? Let me tell you, if they would use napalm and like Fallujah and all the bad guys hiding out in those bunkers, it gets them out.
Yeah.
See how flat it is, that river there? See all the old, many years ago, see all the rice paddies? They're not being farmed. I'm sure they're farmed with rice now, but not now. See, there's a M60 down there. Yeah. Just flying over. That's how flat it is. Nice and cool up there. Pretty. That's my compound. My second 6 months. See the helicopter pad that looks like the H? Yeah. And the berm around it and stuff. So there was nothing going on out there. That land used to be, you know, rice fields and stuff, but it's not now. It's not when I was there. Going to go on an operation. See, the Vietnamese are small. I got a radio and a pistol. That's all I need. But the Vietnamese the average man's about 5'4". Just going out there, and their operations were always so. That's a little Cambodian soldier. I took care of his daughter got real sick, and I had some basic medicines that helped her. And that's the way they lived. It's in the mud. And that's a Vietnamese officer there. He was a real prima donna. He hated to get wet, and he always had a girlfriend, and they'd make him go out in the field. He just hated it. Yeah. So you can tell he doesn't even want to get his elbows wet. And then. That's a Vietnamese intelligence officer. I got my grenade, having a lunch there, my weapons, radio, things like that. Again, mud, muck and mud. So
it's almost like you guys dealt with the mud and stuff better than they did.
Mud's terrible.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of photography of the children.
These are great shots.
Now that's a little houseboat. I'm just sitting there. See the girl in the back just over my right shoulder? She's a local prostitute. Yeah, I thought I got to get a picture in here too. The guys were coming to go and take her in that little back room all the time. It's a little tiny floating little sampan tied up as a restaurant. And that's looking, the bottom is our berm. That's looking out over the South China Sea. It would show better. Okay, that's actually in one of the bigger cities. He's a Vietnamese lieutenant colonel. He's kind of my counterpart. Okay. He was American trained. His wife was married an American officer. See, we're catching rainwater.
Okay.
See, that's where they live. See, there's the berm and the bunker, and they live in those little tiny things, and that lady's washing her stuff, cooking right over it, and the water is just stagnant and smells and dead animals in it and stuff. So that's where they live, and I'm living better than that, let me tell you. And that's the district chief. That's the entrance. See the barbed wire? How much barbed wire they have on that? All rolled
They like that, huh?
Yeah. Now again, see, we're catching water. It's muck in there, and that's how they live along the sides there. And there's a little, just underneath is where they dig the dirt out and throw it up, and we're catching water. We're probably in our underwear. And there's my one of my squad there. Now that's con.
Con.
Yeah, see, there's my weapons. I've got M79, M16s, and see that on the far left, the girl with the blonde hair?
Oh, yeah.
That's the Rise Saving King girl. Saving me from being thought to be gay or something.
That's funny.
Yeah, but he later on must have had some grand booty or something. I don't know. Windy day, blew over a flagpole. And that's Sergeant Tom Kuhn. He was my sergeant. And that's the Vietnamese, the ex-Viet Cong on the right. See him there?
And with his gun? Is that the Viet Cong?
Yeah, with looking to the right, the American with a cigarette. That's Tom Kuhn in our boat on one of the little rivers there. Again, children. Oh, I'm doing that. That's our shower. That's built up about 6 or 7 feet. And that's Tom sitting up there. And there's our barrels. And we go up there and pee and take a shower and ran into the moat right underneath the girls' houses and the people's houses and stuff like that. So we're just sitting up there, getting out of the odor. See, there's the barbed wire. See the dog on the right? I hated that dog. And one leg didn't work. It was so full of mange, and for some reason the dog hated me, and I hated it.
Just didn't hit it off, huh?
No, and one day the dog, it was a free-ranging dog in the compound. They were cooking or doing something out on the ground out there, and I grabbed a piece of it. No, they don't have chicken, they have duck. And so they hit it, and it fell over, and then they chopped it up and ate it.
Wow.
So I thought, good riddance to you.
Wow.
And now, this is pretty typical. See, we're all drinking beer there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This is one of those little ceremonial things, and I'm soaked with beer there, probably half drunk. And a lot of this is going along there and so forth. See the guy just to my left in the white shirt?
Yeah.
He's a major. He was worthless, Major Bay. He had 2 wives. He was South Vietnamese, of course. He had a wife, and he'd alternate them. One would come down, he'd send one back to the city. The other one would come down, and he made sure they never met. Because once they did, my God, did they ever fight.
So they did meet?
Yeah, they met once. He didn't work it out just right.
Oh boy.
That's that's the, I forget his name, but on the left is my Viet Cong, ex-Viet Cong. That's inside. And there's my briefing charts on the right. See in that song something? That means River, Mr. Doc. So that's where I would stand. And right underneath there would be the dead rats and stuff like that. We had a little sleeping area behind it. And there's, for a while, I had the black sergeant there for a little while. He liked Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and that's, again, he's drunk. Yeah, he doesn't need to stand it up. And see, somebody's hammock in the back. That's our upstairs shower. We could take baths there. We had a little tiny room there in the back. We built all that. Inside, a corrugated metal shelter, or metal building. Cafe. That's where I went and ate all the time. See the mud on the floor and the dogs in there and stuff like that?
Yeah, they call that a cafe.
It's a cafe, yeah. That's where I went and got my lunch every day. See? Mud. See, that's just river water. See that piece of ice there? That's just frozen river water. When it thaws, all kinds of stuff floats up in that. Pieces of it's not sterile.
No.
No, it's just frozen river water. But anyway, she's got the boiling water. See, they just wash that stuff right there. Okay, that's from the top of where Tom was sitting up looking down. See, everybody's got that little plank there, and they're built over that.
Okay.
And the distance is the river and things like. See, we got interior wire. So if they break into your compound, we got lots of interior wire that at night hopefully they run into. See, we got interior wire too, kind of channels them into areas. That guy's got hurt. That's our boat on the left. That's a sampan on the right. We were on an operation. He got shot. I don't know, stepped on a mine. We're going to take him back up to some medevac. Yeah. It's a Vietnamese.
Okay.
And there's my squad, getting ready to go out. See how heavily they armed? They would shoot people in the back. They would kill prisoners. They just say, run as fast as you can.
It's a good crew if you want them to protect you.
Yeah, I would sometimes just turn around and walked away and go, it's your war. They took no prisoners.
Wow.
They took no prisoners. And one day they sent us models. Some agencies sent us models. See my rifle in the back? We're building model airplanes. That's
so you got a lot of companies that actually, the private industry, like, supported you.
Yeah, I guess so. We got DSP boxes, the rain coming down. That's the way we rain. See the interior wire again. See, we got it all over. You can't just, yeah, now you got to know where you're going. Hey, we're getting ready to go out. See how generally shorter they are?
Yeah.
And I don't wear a helmet. Nice, that's a minigun. And see, all you need is electrical power and it turns. Once it turns, everything else is automatic.
It's just an on-off switch?
Yeah, so you hook up a 12 or a 24-volt battery to that gun, it shoots. In fact, during the war, I heard that sometimes if we could not safely get the Americans that are dead down there, we bomb the airplane, shoot it up. The helicopter, just destroy it. Cannot let them get that gun.
With the people down there?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's too dangerous to go get their bodies at that point in time. It's too risky, but they see them down there trying to get the gun out of it, they would blow it up.
Yeah.
Now, see, here's a little tiny compound. They're throwing smoke down there. So what they're saying is this is the direction of the wind, and I guess we're going to hover in and land on that. See that little tiny compound? It's probably guarding that little piece of a village or something. And all kinds of weapons. That's a silenced Swedish K. And we're just shooting for fun. But that's got a silencer on it. It made no sound at all.
Wow.
Yeah, Swedish K. That's a M2 carbine, full automatic. Again, just shooting for fun. I guess same picture. Okay, we're on an opera. But see, the operations are very stop for lunch. So the bad guys always knew. We very seldom make cuts. See their fishing weir in the back?
So did the Viet Cong, did they take advantage of these, or did they just kind of like...
It melted away.
Okay.
They would go, they got no reason, because we got lots more firepower. They just go, we'll just lay low until you guys pass through, and then we'll rise up again. So we're getting some coconut and drinking in there, but there's their fish weir. And of course, I mean, look at these kids standing around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So this is how complicated. I got my buck knife there. Again, just having something to eat. And how can you fight a war with all the kids around and stuff like that?
Yeah. That was wild.
There's my building. We're on the right half side of it. That's Tom.
Okay.
So we built inside that. And there's our ladder going up. We go up and dump water up there and catch it off the spouts and stuff like that. It leaks like crazy. It's full of bullet holes. But look at the muck in the mud. It's, you got used to the smell. That's an outside look. Now our place would have been just to the right. See, every little family has its own shooting hole, and this is the moat where they dug the mud out to make
it's
that.
Almost like a crude castle.
Yeah, it's a citadel, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
Again, they're building the compound in the middle. See the sandbags in the wire. They're weaving the wire, the RPG wire. And oh, this is kind of cool. See, got my buck knife. This is a little 1.5 kW generator. And when I wanted power to run our projector for movies, I would set up a screen and they'd drop off 8 movies, and I'd show this village people of movies like Vanishing Point. They would go, yeah, what's a flush toilet? They have cars. They didn't know that.
Yeah.
And they were just amazed.
Culture shock.
Yeah. Well, what they would do is they'd slowly tap into my line and start running all their little lights and their hooches along the berm there. So eventually my generator would start chugging and barely handle the load. And they go, so about every week or so, they'd slowly tap into the line, into my generator when it would barely handle load. I'd take my line off, throw it to 220, bang, blow them all, flick mine on, now I got power. They'd tap back in, a week later, take mine off, flip it, 220, bang, blow all their lights, put mine back on. So I'm working on my motor, cleaning the spark plugs. Now, these are prisoners. See, that's a grandmother, the baby, the mother in the back. They just put them underneath that in wire cages out in the open. They're in the rain and the sun and the heat. They can't stand up in that thing. And they bring them out and they would drag them into the back and have their way with them. And they put the guys in there and take them out and shoot them and stuff like that.
Wow.
They're just sitting in there. Okay, this is the back room here. That's my bunk on the right. I'm doing some weights. See our pin-ups there? Anyway, so we made some weights there and stuff like that, trying to work out. So that's where I lived. I mean, no sheets, nothing. Just a mosquito net.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Now this is Desert Storm, I think. Okay, this is after the war because we're real comfortable. We're not wearing our, camo and stuff. This is a nice, pleasant evening and stuff. It's probably pretty warm. These are men in my unit just kind of relaxing, playing guitars. That's my hospital unit there from the air. See, we have a berm. When I got there, that's just desert.
Yeah.
And all that came up. But look what it takes to run a 400-bed hospital.
And those are where the bulldozers.
Yeah, that berm is actually about 8 or 10 feet tall.
Wow.
And we have 2 entrances that are guarded. But that's motor pool and trucks and everything else. These are this is living quarters.
Sure.
Here's living quarters. Here's administration. This is the hospital.
Okay.
It's air conditioned. It was pretty nice. Another view. I was up in a helicopter and did that.
Yeah.
Motor pool, all that kind of stuff. And this is a Mascal. See, they're coming in. All my men are doing stuff in there. We're getting a lot of prisoners. That's inside my hospital. They're on their litters. Now, this is still earlier in the war because it's still wet. Every time you went out to take a piss, you had to put all your equipment on. Your web gear, weapons, helmet, strap on, just to walk 50 feet outside.
Wow.
It's always wet like that. And then it got dry. Another, you know, what's happening here, seeing working over the patients and carrying them around and running in labs and stuff. They're all wearing their protective masks. See, they got them wearing on their hips. Even in the hospital for gas. Chow line. Standing in chow, waiting for chow to start. And look, everybody's wearing their equipment, helmet, everything else. Inside my tent. So I lived like that for 6 months.
So it's like a big open tent
Big
area?
tent, yeah, and you just have your stuff there and hang it up like that. And the men and women, we live together. You know, at night you can't tell who's farting. Is it the women or the men? And there's not a lot of privacy, let me tell you. In fact, the girls would get undressed and the guys would get undressed. It wasn't any big deal.
Yeah.
Now, I forget if this is coming or going, but when you leave, I think this is when I was leaving, they have to inspect you to make sure that you don't bring back weapons that are explosives. So this is a big tent, they open up your stuff. Now, here we're having lunch, and of course you can say by now it's pretty casual because we're not having to wear our helmets and stuff. The flies are incredible, so the whole time you're eating you're going like this.
They have flies in the middle of the
fly in your mouth, these big horse flies.
Wow.
So when you hold your food like to take a bite, the whole time everybody's talking to you like this. And the flies, they go in your mouth, just awful. So you never hold, you can't tell, but everybody's waving their food with them.
Yeah.
And they're just doing stuff in the back there. Now, we're probably taking the hospital tentage down now. See that teamwork? The person on the right says, you walk it out, put it down. They're disassembling it. And that's what happens.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Or something like, no, that's where we put the helipad. That's a Chinook bringing him in, probably 10 or 15. That's an Iraqi. You can tell by what he is.
Yeah.
And see the diesel we put there? And we had a baby. Same day we had some Iraqis die. We actually had a mom come in and deliver. So we had both births and deaths in our hospital. I thought that was, you know, the life comes and life goes.
Yeah.
A little, too bad he's not an American citizen.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's things when you're in a tank that gets hit. You can tell that's an Iraqi. But he's innovative and everything else. And that's that.
Wow.
All right. Let's see here. I'm going to let it cool for a minute. Okay, this is a 1 to 50,000 map I carried with me, folded up in my pocket with the drawings and markings I had on it the day I left, so I don't remember some of what they were. The blue ones were our compounds, but the black would be probably where we thought the enemy was that day with coordinates and so forth. But that's the Sonodoc River. This is VC Lake, and a couple of years before they had an American assault into VC Lake and 5 helicopters got shot down into that lake. So we never went there. That was still a bad place to be. But I carried this around and it's still the way it was the day I brought it home.
Very cool. And do you want to point out some of these markings?
Well, this is the Sonodoc River. This is VC Lake, as we called it. And my compound where I was probably here, right here, my main post. These are small. There'd probably be 20 to 40 friendlies, Vietnamese friendlies at each of these places. This is the U Minh Forest. And right up in here was where Nick Rowe was picked up, right over here. And just above me was another American district where a friend of mine, one night they made a mass assault and he went up on top and climbed on a 50 caliber and killed over 450 of them in the wire. So we went up there the next day and they were hanging all in the wire, the bad guys, and he really saved the whole place. I think he got a Distinguished Service Cross for that. He just stayed up there on that gun, and on top of that tower, just above this, and saved it. So,
very cool.
And that's the South China Sea, right down here on the far right, just underneath. That's the South China Sea there. So we got good crab from down there, although I always had to eat the eggs, which I didn't like it because they were very ceremonial and always gave me the eggs of the crabs, and it's not very good. Very cool. All right, anything else you'd like to cover on here? No, I've still got my markings on it. Someday I may figure out what I'm going to do with it. That's very cool. Okay, okay. All right, thank you again.